There's something about Morgan Freeman that feels timeless. Like he's always been exactly who he is now, that voice, that presence, that calm authority. But that's not how it happened. Not even close. He spent decades grinding in obscurity, taking whatever work he could get, wondering if it was ever going to happen for him. He didn't become the Morgan Freeman we know until he was in his 50s. And that's the part of his story that matters most. Because success that comes late hits different. You've lived enough life by then to know what it cost. He was born in 1937 in Memphis, Tennessee, but he didn't stay there long. His family moved around constantly during his childhood, Mississippi, Indiana, back to Tennessee, chasing work during the Depression and its aftermath. His father was a barber, his mother a teacher, and there were 4 kids to feed. Money was always tight. Freeman has talked about growing up poor, about hand-me-down clothes and hunger that was just part of life. But he also talks about how it taught him resilience, how to make do with what you had, how to keep going when things were hard. He was a curious kid, drawn to stories and performance from early on. He saw his first movie at age 6 and was hooked immediately. The magic of it, the escape, the way it transported you somewhere else. He started acting in school plays, found he was good at it, found it gave him something he couldn't quite name. But acting wasn't a career path for a black kid from Mississippi in the 1940s. It wasn't even a realistic dream. So he didn't think about it that way. He just did it because he loved it. When he was 12, he won a statewide drama competition. That was the first time someone told him he might actually have talent, that this thing he loved doing was something he could be good at. But even then, the idea of being a professional actor seemed impossible. So when he graduated high school, he did what a lot of young men did in the 1950s. He joined the military, the Air Force specifically. He'd thought about being a pilot, had romantic ideas about flying, about seeing the world from above. He hated it. Hated the structure, the rigidity, the violence of it. He worked as a radar technician, spent 4 years in uniform, and by the end of it, he knew 2 things for certain. He didn't want anything to do with the military ever again, and he needed to figure out what he actually wanted to do with his life. He was 22 when he got out, no clear direction, no money, no connections. But he had that feeling from the school plays, that sense that maybe acting was worth pursuing. So he moved to Los Angeles. This is where the story gets hard, because Freeman spent the next decade and a half struggling. He took acting classes at Los Angeles City College, worked whatever jobs he could find to pay rent. He moved to New York because that's where theater was happening, where you could learn the craft, where there were opportunities if you were willing to starve for them. He did off-Broadway shows, tiny productions that paid nothing, that nobody saw. He danced in the World's Fair Pavilion. He was in his 20s, then his 30s, watching other actors get breaks while he stayed stuck. He got some television work here and there, small roles, nothing that stuck. In 1971, he landed a recurring role on a children's show called The Electric Company. He played Easy Reader, a hip character who promoted literacy, and the show was popular, ran for years. It was steady work, decent money, exposure. But it was also a kids' show, and Freeman was approaching 40. He was grateful for the work but also frustrated. He didn't want to be known as a children's entertainer. He wanted serious roles, real acting, the chance to show what he could do. The problem was that Hollywood in the 1970s didn't have many roles for black actors, period. And the ones that existed were usually stereotypes, criminals or servants or sidekicks. Freeman didn't want those parts. He had standards, had dignity, wasn't going to demean himself just to get on screen. But that meant turning down work, meant staying poor, meant watching opportunities go to other people who were willing to compromise. It would have been easy to give up, to decide that acting wasn't going to happen, that he should find something more practical. A lot of people did give up. Freeman didn't. He kept doing theater, off-Broadway and regional productions, honing his craft even when nobody was watching. In 1978, he got cast in a production of The Mighty Gents and earned a Drama Desk Award nomination. In 1980, he was in Coriolanus and got an Obie Award. The theater community was starting to recognize him, starting to see that he was special. But theater doesn't make you a star. It doesn't pay well, doesn't get you in magazines, doesn't change your life. It just means you're good at your craft and that you're still grinding. Then in 1987, everything shifted. He was 50 years old. 50. an age when most actors have either made it or accepted they never will. He got cast in a play called Driving Miss Daisy, about an elderly Jewish woman and her black chauffeur in the South, and the complicated relationship that develops between them. Freeman played Hoke Colburn, the chauffeur, and he was magnificent. The play was a huge success, won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama, and Freeman's performance was widely praised. Suddenly, people were paying attention. When they made the movie version in 1989, Freeman reprised his role opposite Jessica Tandy. The film was a hit, critically and commercially. It got nominated for 9 Academy Awards, won 4 including Best Picture. Freeman got nominated for Best Actor. He didn't win, but it didn't matter. At 52, he'd finally broken through. Hollywood suddenly wanted him, saw him as bankable, started offering him real roles. What's interesting is that Freeman didn't play it safe once he got his shot. He could have taken easy parts, cashed checks, coasted on the recognition. Instead, he chose challenging roles that showcased his range. In 1989, he played a violent pimp in Street Smart, a performance so intense and frightening that it earned him his first Oscar nomination. In 1992, he played the loyal friend in Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood's revisionist Western, and the movie won Best Picture. He was building a reputation as a serious actor, someone who elevated whatever project he was in. Then came The Shawshank Redemption in 1994. He played Red, a longtime prison inmate who befriends a man wrongly convicted of murder. The film flopped at the box office initially, but it found an audience on home video and cable, and over time it became one of the most beloved movies ever made. Freeman's narration, his voice, his weathered dignity, all of it became iconic. That role cemented something. It made him not just a respected actor, but a cultural presence. C7N came in 1995, where he played a detective hunting a serial killer. Then he was God in Bruce Almighty, then Lucius Fox in the Dark Knight trilogy, then Nelson Mandela in Invictus. The roles kept coming, bigger, and Freeman kept delivering. But here's the thing. He was in his 60s and 70s doing this. The age when most actors are winding down, he was at his peak. His voice became its own phenomenon. That distinctive baritone, warm and authoritative and somehow comforting. Everybody wanted him to narrate things about how his grateful success came when it did because he was ready for it. That if it had come earlier, when he was younger and hungrier and more reckless, he might have screwed it up. By the time fame arrived, he'd lived enough life to handle it, to not let it consume him, to keep it in perspective. And there's probably truth to that. The Morgan Freeman who became a star at 50 was a different person than the Morgan Freeman who struggled at 30. He'd been humbled by years of rejection, had learned patience, had figured out who he was independent of whether Hollywood accepted him or not. His personal life was complicated, though. He was married and divorced twice, had 4 children, experienced the normal mess of relationships and family that everyone deals with. In 2008, he was in a serious car accident that left him with nerve damage in his left hand, a condition he still lives with. In 2018, he faced allegations of inappropriate behavior from multiple women who'd worked with him, claims of unwanted comments and touching. Freeman apologized for making anyone uncomfortable, denied some of the allegations, but the accusations complicated his public image at a time when the industry was reckoning with decades of misconduct. It's a reminder that even beloved figures are human, flawed, capable of causing harm even if it's not intentional. Freeman's legacy as an actor is secure, but like a lot of men of his generation, he grew up in an industry with different norms around behavior, and those norms weren't good. Whether the allegations rise to the level of the worst abuses that came out during that period is debatable, but they're still serious, still worth acknowledging as part of the full picture. What's undeniable is his impact as an actor. He brought dignity to every role, even the ones that could have been one-dimensional. He made characters feel real, grounded, lived in. He never seemed like he was performing, even when he was. There was an ease to his acting, a naturalism that made it look effortless. But that ease came from decades of practice, of doing plays nobody saw, of refining his craft in obscurity. There's something poignant about the fact that Freeman's most iconic roles came so late. He was Red in Shawshank at 57. He was God in Bruce Almighty at 66. He was Lucius Fox in Batman Begins at 68. These aren't roles for young men. They required a lived-in quality, a sense of having seen things, of carrying weight. Freeman had that because he'd actually lived it. He'd struggled, failed, kept going, survived. That came through in his performances, gave them depth that a younger actor couldn't have faked. And he's still working. He's 87 now, still taking roles, still showing up. He's been in mediocre movies and great ones, has done prestige projects and paycheck gigs, and he approaches all of them with the same professionalism. Because he remembers what it's like to not have work, to be begging for opportunities. He doesn't take it for granted. The late success thing matters because it changes how you relate to the work. When success comes early, it can feel like your birthright, like the universe owes you recognition. When it comes late, after years of rejection and struggle, you know it's a gift. You know it could have gone differently, that luck played a role, that timing mattered. Freeman has talked about this, about how he doesn't feel entitled to anything, about how grateful he is for every role, every opportunity. There's also something about late success that makes it more sustainable. He didn't burn out at 30 from too much too fast. He didn't develop a drug problem or spiral into ego. By the time fame arrived, he was grounded, knew who he was, had built a life that wasn't entirely dependent on Hollywood's validation. That's rare. Most actors who make it big young end up struggling later, unable to handle the pressure or the loss of attention. Freeman avoided that trap by taking the long road. His story also challenges the narrative we usually tell about success. We love child prodigies and wunderkinds, people who make it by 25, who peak early and shine bright. But that's not the only path, maybe not even the most meaningful one. Freeman's trajectory suggests that sometimes the best work comes from people who have lived, who have struggled, who have had time to develop not just skill, but wisdom. He couldn't have played the roles he's known for when he was 30. He needed the years, the experience, the mileage. And for people who are struggling, who are in their 30s or 40s or 50s and haven't made it yet, Freeman's story is proof that it's not over. That the timeline you imagined isn't the only timeline. That sometimes the waiting is part of what makes the arrival meaningful. He spent decades preparing for an opportunity that might never come, and when it finally did, he was ready. That's not luck, that's resilience. But it's also worth acknowledging what was lost in those years. The roles he could have played if he'd gotten his shot earlier. The financial security that would have made life easier for his family. The recognition that might have felt good to have before 50. There's a cost to late success, even when it eventually arrives. You don't get those years back. You don't undo the struggle. You just get to move forward with whatever comes next. Freeman seems to have made peace with that. He doesn't talk with bitterness about the early years, doesn't dwell on what could have been. He focuses on what is, on the work he gets to do now, on the fact that he made it at all. That's probably healthy. Probably the only way to survive in an industry that chews people up and spits them out. But it doesn't mean the struggle didn't hurt. It doesn't mean there weren't moments of despair or anger or resentment. The thing about Freeman is that he makes it all look easy now. The voice, the presence, the effortless authority, but it wasn't easy. Nothing about his journey was easy. He worked for it, suffered for it, waited longer than most people could have waited. And when the moment came, when he finally got his chance, he delivered. That's the story underneath the icon. Not the voice of God or the wise narrator, but a man who refused to quit even when quitting made more sense than continuing. He's given us incredible performances, characters that will last as long as movies exist. He's also shown us that there's no expiration date on dreams, no age by which you have to make it or accept failure. His career didn't really start until most people's would be ending, and it's been extraordinary precisely because of that timing. The depth, the gravitas, the authenticity, all of it comes from those years in the wilderness. So when you watch Morgan Freeman on screen, when you hear that voice and feel that presence, remember what it took to get there. Remember the decades of struggle, the roles that never came, the doubt and frustration and persistence. Remember that success came late, and that made all the difference. Not in spite of the wait, but because of it. Because he'd earned it in a way that early success never teaches you. Through patience, through refusal to give up, through showing up every day even when nobody was watching. That's the real story of Morgan Freeman. Not the icon, but the man who became the icon by outlasting everyone's expectations, including probably his own. He proved that timing isn't everything, that talent and persistence can overcome bad luck and bad timing, that it's never too late if you're willing to keep going.